This is Peter Collins with another sales tip for the professional salesperson. In this module, I want to share that the closing process starts at the very first contact you make with a prospect and not at the very end of the presentation. Now, here's something I can share with every salesperson, whether they've been in sales for 5 weeks or over 50 years, as I have. And that is that the closing of any sale starts at the very beginning of the sale. Yes, at the time you first greet your prospect, or say, even at the time you had pre-arranged the appointment over the phone. Yes, that's right. You should start the closing process as early as the initial contact, because it's the way you begin that will generally determine how you attempt to sell will end. See, the point is, if the professional starts successfully, they can then be assured that as they follow the rules to as close to the letter as possible, they will be rewarded with a successful ending as well. But they must take into consideration their overall attitude towards selling. And above all, they must take into account their desire to be successful, because that will mostly determine the outcome. You see, the truth of the matter is that no professional has ever closed a sale without first believing he or she was going to close that sale. And mostly that was usually way before the presentation began. That's right. The salesperson too must believe he or she is going to be successful before they can be successful. They must start the sale with a totally positive mental attitude. Then once they adopt this attitude and then totally believe in the product and the company, and most importantly, they believe in themselves, they become quite a force to be reckoned with. Actually, the biggest telltale sign is that the professional becomes extremely enthusiastic, persistent, and the person who gets positive closing results from that prospect and most of the other prospects they present to. And one last point. Successful selling is definitely not for the doubters, the unprofessional, the lazy, or even the feeble-minded. No, successful selling is definitely something the professional salesperson does extremely well. Yes, extremely well. Now, I want to break down some myths about the closing process. In fact, closing the sale, because the word close to most people suggests the end of something. Yet in the selling process, closing with most professionals will start at the beginning. Now, to add further confusion to those that are not aware of what happens during the selling process, I have personally closed now in the middle of my presentation. And I've been doing this for more than 40 years. And for the rest of that presentation, I spend my time confirming what they've bought, why they've bought it, what they're about to receive, and how they're about to use whatever product or service I'm selling. And that's why you need to appreciate that you need to start using closing suggestions right from the very beginning of qualifying your prospect in whatever presentation you do. Now, with today's modern salesperson, unfortunately, the word closing, in most cases, is a bad word to them. It's something they're not used to, and it's something they fight at every particular point because they are confused. But I want you to think about closing the sale to be something like you attempting your graduation, because when you undertake to study a specific format or a specific formula for a specific reason, right from the very beginning, you're mentally prepared to graduate. And you do that from the minute you start learning. You don't do it at the very end, because without you visualizing the graduation, you'll never make the grade. So the closing process is something that doesn't start at the end of something. It always starts at the beginning of something. The second thing I want to bring to your attention is that closing the sale sounds like a form of definitive process. It's a foregone conclusion. But it's not, because closing the sale is simply part of the selling process. And I also want you to think of it as a form of mutual confirmation between the buyer and the seller, because selling is an ongoing process. Qualification in selling is the key, and it's also impossible to close the sale using the wrong process or trying to sell to the wrong prospect. It just doesn't happen. And the most important thing when it comes to selling is every one of your clients wants to buy from a professional person they both like and they trust. And if you don't gender that trust, they possibly won't like you either. So at that point, it's going to be far more difficult to help them buy from you. Now, the third point is closing builds on everything that has already taken place during the sales call, like the information sharing that you've gone through, like the report building, and like the trust that's been agreed to and acted upon. And unlike so many thoughts about the selling or closing process, it's never a time to resort to any form of trickery or manipulation or unsavory practices or tactics. That should never even be contemplated, because selling is about building relationships, providing cost-effective solutions, and the driving factor in every form of selling is underlined by one 5-letter word, and that word is trust. And if you can't build trust or build on trust, you'll never develop any form of relationship. So it's an ongoing factor that building relationships and working with trust is something that cannot be avoided and should never be manipulated, no matter what the situation. The fourth point is you should never not take advantage, and especially you should never lose the opportunity to close the sale, no matter where you are in the selling process. And the other thing you've got to remember, good questions are vital, because good questions will reveal the triggers that will make them want to buy. And once you know what the triggers are, you'll be able to deliver value that they want. In fact, you'll possibly appear to be delivering more value than they wanted in the first place. And you know, once that happens, you'll become much more than a salesperson to them. In fact, you'll become a trusted marketing advisor, and they'll look to you for advice and for counsel. And you know, whenever you appear successful in selling to your prospects, you'll appear as the professional they'll not only want to do business with, but will want to come back and do more business with in the future. And the fifth point is you need to work out what works best for you. And that way, you'll take a systematic approach that will help you record every one of your presentations, help you record every one of your closes. And then once you've got that, you'll be able to analyze them, give yourself a percentage on your closing ability over a period of time, and then work out a way of improving on them. And the more you compile these results and dwell on them, the better your analysis will become, and the more you will close, and the better you will sell. It's a cycle that keeps on improving if you allow it to, but it's up to you to ensure that it moves in your favor and not against you. That's why you need to work out what works best for you and ensure that you can make it better at each possible step.